Vamos a dar comienzo a la conferencia de prensa. First question, Cyber News.
The first question is based on of what the governor says about the Law 17. How do you think it will sync that law with the fiscal plan regarding the cost of the pension funds, the cost of the we have to pay to the bondholders, etc., and keeping the kilowatt per hour in 20 cents or below?
Chairman or Robert?
I'll start and just say a couple words, and then John and Robert can add. One is, as Robert said during the meeting, we adjust the fiscal plan based on all the numbers that come in, and that includes numbers of the load of the electricity usage, which one factor leading that to go down is if people switch to solar. So we adjust to all of those things. As I was saying, we also, as is the governor, are 100% supportive of renewables, both by customers of PREPA and by PREPA itself. And one of the nice things about PREPA increasingly generating through renewables itself, solar especially, is renewables are much cheaper than traditional forms of generation. And so the shift to renewables should drive down the cost of generation. And the cost of generation is a large percentage of the bill. It's something like 60% of your electricity bill is generation. So that's a force for the good. As PREPA generates more and more by renewables, that should be a positive factor in terms of PREPA. Robert or John, do you want to add?
I would just add that in the end, PREB is going to be setting the rates. And what we are doing in the plan of adjustment and in the fiscal plan is actually reflecting all of the information that we are getting from everyone from the generators as well as the transmission as from LUMA and all the best information that we have as of today. That is what's in the PREPA fiscal plan, and that gets revised every year. So every year we will get the new information and update the fiscal plan to reflect that. Because the plan of adjustment is still open, we got new information, and that is why it's been dramatically lowered. But that is why the amount that we'll pay for the bondholders has decreased dramatically based on that information. Once that is set, it would be PREB that is setting the rates, which is, as the governor pointed out, the goal would be to keep the rates as low as possible or as affordable as possible.
Entonces, decir en este momento, como algunos han planteado, de que el plan fiscal es insostenible para la economía de Puerto Rico, es un proceso adelantado en este momento. ¿Eso es lo que podría usted decir en este momento?
The fiscal plan is only a function of what the needs are that are being requested, and the estimates are that are being requested by both PREB on the cost side, LUMA on the operated. One of the items, for example, in the fiscal plan is a requirement for energy efficiency, and it required to spend money in order to assist households in becoming more energy efficient. All right, that's consistent with Act 17. If we were to not have the money for energy efficiency, right, costs would go up, people's costs would go higher. So those are the kinds of things that are in the plan. So, and again, the plan of adjustment is dramatically lower as proposed. The final decision maker there is going to be the federal court, and again, the board responded by lowering the plan based on the information that we have. And as far as the fiscal plan, if next year there's different data, regarding Act 17, different data on renewables. The fiscal plan is going to reflect that. And then this is also the first year that PREB is actually going to be making the determinations. And in the end, they're going to be ones setting the rates.
Mayra Acevedo from Noticias.
Yes.
I have two questions of follow-up. Does this mean your explanation that the 20 cent per kilowatt hour is feasible? Do you think that would be a reasonable standard according to what the governor also said?
Which 20 cent per
The 20
kilowatt?
cent per kilowatt
He said
per.
that's what he's aiming
Oh.
for.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Yeah. The governor, I think, was referring to, it was an aspirational goal. What I heard him say was that it was an aspirational
Do
goal.
you think it's feasible?
Right.
Do you think it's feasible? Because that's what he says would benefit long-term economical development.
The lower the rates, the better, right? So the question is, do you get there? How do you get there while investing, while making sure that you have a reliable energy grid? But the lower the rate, the better. The question is, as of right now, we know what the rates are. The plan of adjustment is going to be lower than anyone probably expected it to be at this point. And I think his point is, as we move forward, the goal would be to keep those rates as low as possible, and that's what PREB's job is. But they have to do it based on real information. They can't arbitrarily lower the rates. If you don't reflect reality in the rates, that's how PREPA ended up where they did, right? That's how you ended up as a bankrupt entity, because you did not reflect reality, and therefore you ended up not being able to pay your debts, and you ended up being bankrupt. That is why you establish PREB as an independent entity who will then be the decision maker on what the rates should be. But agree with the governor in the aspirational goal, keep the rates as low as possible.
Okay. Another technical question is this the first certified complying budget that will lead to the eventual, how would you say, phase out of the board? Could you tell us where we are at with respect to, is this the first one, the third one, the second one?
Mm-hmm. There's two factors in the Promesa statute in relation to the termination of the board. The first factor is actually market access at reasonable rates. The second factor is, so that's two, you have to meet both. So on the question of where we are with market access, I think we're not at market access. I think the point is to try to create as much confidence in the markets so that they feel comfortable. I think the markets feel comfortable as long as the board is here right now, because this is the first time in the last 4 consecutive times, the first time that there's been a budget passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, right, and now approved by the board. Last time that happened was in 22. So there's a gap in between that. So this marks progress, but I'm just using that example of confidence, right? You have to be able to pass budgets and the governor sign it in order to build confidence in order to build even confidence in the markets, right, to come back. Then the second one is 4 consecutive balanced budgets. We're still waiting for audited financial statements. We only have through 21. So we're still waiting for audited financial statements through 22, 23, and 24. And we'll know there if those budgets were balanced. But as I pointed out in my comments earlier, even for the budgets that have been passed, subsequent spending has occurred on those budgets, and then there was a gap as to the legislature not approving a budget for 3 times in the last 4. So I think we're making progress on it, but there's 2 factors, and even if you have consecutive balanced budgets, you still have to meet that other requirement on market access, which is a critical piece, and it was the number 1 actual factor. But I think our goal here, through all the fiscal plans, is to put all the structures in place so that the markets have confidence and you can return to getting access to the markets.
can I just add to that? It's a very difficult question, obviously. I mean, it's not, I guess what I'm saying is, as our director said, there's a lot at play, right, on what counts as a budget, what doesn't, that we're working through, waiting for audited financial statements and such. But what's most important here, other than just checking a box, is to make sure that we're changing the climate, right, the budgeting climate. I mean, there's got to be a change, a shift to where the legislature can pass a balanced budget that's structurally balanced, that's built on modified accrual accounting, and the governor signs it into law, right? Now, the board has certified 3 consecutive balanced budgets, right? But the question is, and we don't even know because until we have the audited financial statements, where we are as far as, but initially we had certified those. But what's most important is that the legislature and the governor, once the board's gone, can continue that, right? So as the public needs to demand is that they will change their practices to make sure that they are passing structurally balanced budgets and implementing those and managing to those during the year so the budget doesn't become out of balance. Because remember, keep in mind, the whole goal of the 4 structurally balanced budgets is that we don't fall back into bankruptcy by not paying our bills or not paying our debt or whatever else it is. And so really there has to be a shift in mindset to be able to do that. And so I think instead of saying what counts, what doesn't, at this point, it's still way premature. It's more what structurally needs to change within our operations and our practices to make sure and to give the market security that when the board's gone, the legislature is going to pass a structurally balanced budget and the governor's going to sign it into law, and then they're going to manage to that throughout the year without the oversight of the FOMB. So that's really kind of where we need to get to at this point.
Thank you, board member. Next question, Channel 2, Telemundo.
Yes, good afternoon. Regarding inventory tax, I would like to know if the board has a position on that. What should happen? What should change in order for the municipalities to have access to the $66 million included in the budget? What should happen? What changes have to be made to the inventory tax specifically in order for that to happen?
Yeah, I'll speak to it briefly. I know John has strong feelings about the inventory tax. But just in relation to what's in the budget, the inventory tax is a tax that hurts the economy of the island significantly. And it's been in controversy for a very long time, and there have been multiple efforts to try to reform it, but none have been successful. What we have in the budget here is an opportunity to resolve the issue in some way, working with the governor, working with the legislature, coming up with a solution. Now, what has been the obstacle to fixing the inventory? One of it has been the people the municipalities that benefit from the inventory tax are resistant to change because they use the inventory for the tax for their budgets, which is a legitimate concern for them. What we did in the budget is provide resources for the municipalities that are in most financial distress and need it. And then before we provide any additional resources to those that would be nice to have it but don't necessarily need the additional fund, let's get everyone in the room and figure out what to do with the inventory tax. The $66 million could be used to deal with those municipalities that may be negatively impacted with reforms to the tax. And I don't think it has to be a complete repeal of the tax, because that would require over $230 million. It would be very difficult. But there are other ways to mitigate, and there are other ways to kind of reform the tax so it is less harmful to the economy of the island. The language that's in the budget is designed to do that and to bring all the parties together, those that are opposed to changes, those that are in favor of changes, bringing them together and saying, how do we actually fix this once and for all? John?
Yeah, and I'll just say real quick on the inventory tax, it's a dumb tax. I mean, it's just a dumb tax that hurts people here on the island. I mean, you guys can't get your cars fixed. You can't get your refrigerator. I mean, people don't carry inventories because they've got to pay taxes, right? It's one of the dumbest tax policies but it's pretty dumb. At the end of the day, as Robert said, in order to change tax policy, you need to make sure that you're making a path for those who are relying on the money, right? Because whenever people are relying on money, there's opposition. So by getting more money to the municipalities, as the governor and the legislature wanted to do, it makes sense to be able to target that to change tax policy, which is going to help people here on the island. And that's the bottom line. And so we're supportive, very supportive, of doing things that streamline the taxes. I mean, again, your tax policy, you want to create your policy based upon the incentives that you want to drive and move forward, right? Having to wait weeks to get your car fixed or whatever else because the people aren't carrying inventories just hurts people on the island, right? It just doesn't make much sense. So this is a way where we were able to apply some extra money to say, yeah, let's talk about that. We can have a gradual, decrease on the reliance on that inventory tax and hopefully offset it. And so, as Robert said, those are the principles. But this is something that we are just supportive of, at least I am, to just have the discussion and make sure. And again, it's not because we want it. It's just it would drive me nuts if I was living here on the island. And I've heard from many, many people that it's driving a lot of people nuts. So it's an opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, and it was just to follow up. In summary on our changes there, we don't want to negatively impact municipalities. We want to fix the inventory tax because it's harmful to people who live and work on the island and businesses. So what we did in the budget is provide the resources, and as John mentioned, and a path to fix the inventory tax again once and for all. And we think it's something that we could accomplish this year.
Thank you, Robert. We have a question from Robert, John Marino is connected. John?
Yes, how are you doing? Thank you. I was just wanted to ask about given the dramatic reduction in PREPA creditor claims, if the board is anticipating any move to reduce PREPA pension benefits from parties during the plan of adjustment process. Chairman Skeel noted today that it's been, I believe he used the word miraculous, the board's ability to protect pensions, and the board did repeatedly warn about the legal risk of not reducing pension benefits during the Commonwealth Plan of Adjustment.
As I mentioned, thanks, John. As I mentioned during the meeting, our plan is to do just what we did with the Commonwealth with the pensions, and that is to freeze the defined benefit plan, to shift to defined contribution, to stop COLAs, but to pay the pension benefits in full. So the expectation is that the pensions will look essentially the same as the Commonwealth pensions.
And you're not anticipating any sort of opposition during that process to that?
There may be, but we believe there are good reasons for that treatment. That treatment was approved in the Commonwealth, and we're hopeful that it will be approved with respect to the PREPA plan of adjustment as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have a last question from CBI, Luis Valentin.
Hi. I have a few questions, but two different topics. The first one, it's regarding following a recent Supreme Court decision on the CBI case against the board. I was wondering if the board has a plan, protocol, or policy of its own to deal with requests for public information.
I think that might be a Jaime El Khoury question. So the question is, we certainly try to be as transparent as possible at all times. We post everything imaginable on our website. We hold public meetings. But the specific question, Jaime, was, do we have a protocol with respect to public requests for information?
No, we normally publish everything in our website. That's what we do. And we try to respond to every letter that we receive, but we do not have a specific protocol in terms of the publishing of, we publish our meeting minutes, etc. So if there's a specific question.
And I understand, and again, I mean, like the government itself publishes a lot of documents, and it's still subject to freedom of information laws and protocols. So that's why I ask if there's a written policy with respect to public request for information that is not in the website probably, or that is considered public?
No, we do not have such protocols. We're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act per promesa. Again, we do try to publish almost everything that we do.
Okay. Well, I should say that there's a number of reports that are not up to date published, including the board monthly reports and conflicts of interest quarterly reports. But I understand that there's no protocol right now in place to address those requests. Will it be one? Is there one? Have you guys discussed having one?
I say we do have protocols in place. We publish every letter, right? Letters that we write, those are all published. We do publish the ethics filings, right, are published. So there's a whole list of things that we probably do more than a lot of other entities and make available and are transparent. With regard to specific requests and how you treat them, I think is what Jaime was referring to. But I think how we've been dealing with that is by making as much information, people who we meet with, right, making as much of that information available as possible and publishing that. And I think you'll find that on our website, we probably provide more transparency and more openness before when anyone even makes a request. Our policy is just, for a lot of information, we just publish it on the website, and oftentimes when requests are made, we'll direct people to the website, because I think often what we find is people don't even realize that some of that information is already available on the websites. There are perhaps some things that maybe requested that are kind of beyond the scope, and I think they're beyond the scope. I've seen some of the requests. Some of those requests are beyond the scope for any entity, and any entity that I've worked for before, they're enormously difficult to pull together, and the information is some of it's just very difficult to kind of put together. Most FOIL rules don't require you to have to create brand new documents that don't really exist. So there's lots of those kinds of rules. And again, I would just summarize it in terms of we have broad transparency in terms of what we automatically post and put on that exceeds most organizations.
Okay, and another topic about the UPR, I saw today that in the presentation you talked about the budget, and there was an amount, I believe it was 102 million, that are subject to requirements or things that the UPR has to do in order to have access to that money. First of all, how much money, and I guess it will include that amount, would the UPR receive from the central government next year?
Well, the 102 is on top of, right? Presuming they would meet all the requirements, they would have access to the 102, but it's not definite, right? So what is the total number? I don't have the exact number.
At least, or generally.
$627 million is the funding for the UPR,
and
inclusive of the 102 million.
That's on top. I'm sorry. That's including the 102 million?
In the 627, yes.
And what does the UPR has to do? Generally, if you can speak to the requirements and the things that are being asked from the UPR in order to access that money?
So we don't have the specific items right at this time because we're working with them to develop those things. And I think what we're doing right now is working with the board, working with the president, the board of trustees for UPR, the governing board, working with the president to identify if we're going to start making the board has made a decision that UPR is a priority, and I think it establishes that with this investment. We want to make sure that the investments are now made for the UPR of the future, right? How are we going to deal with the enrollment, declines? How are you going to deal with the demographic shifts? How are you going to deal with making sure that you're, meeting the needs of the employees and meeting the needs of the students, getting more money in the classroom? So those are all of those decisions. The board recently approved, the governing board of UPR, a strategic plan for the future of UPR. The board wants to make sure that UPR is part of the overall economic development strategy of the island, because it's critical. You have to have, right, it's critical for the training, it's critical to making sure that when people are looking at the island, they have a workforce that's trained, they have confidence in. And that is the rationale behind making this additional investment. But we're working with them to develop a plan. These are the new things that we are doing and how we're going to make investments so that we can meet those goals. So they're not defined yet, but the budget process was faster than the development process. So we want to make sure we set the money aside, and then we quickly work with them to develop a plan, and they meet those plans, and then we're able to give them the funds.
If we don't have any more questions, we conclude the press conference. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Buenas tardes a todos.